All right, hey guys, welcome to the Selling North Georgia podcast. I'm Corey Shields, and I'm here with Boomer Bates and Julian Paramo. Let's do that again because I've never said your last name before. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Selling North Georgia podcast. I'm Corey Shields, and I'm here with
Boomer Bates,
Julian Paramo.
And today we are just going to talk a little bit about how these guys got into real estate and the home buying process as well. So let's get to it.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on today. I was in the restaurant business for a long time, and those hours were horrible. I had a buddy from the Marine Corps, and he'd gotten into real estate up in Pennsylvania and was telling me how much fun it was and everything else. And it sounded interesting. I started watching some Tom Ferry on the internet, and here we are now.
I think I showed one of your first listings that you had. It was around that time, I think.
Yeah.
There's a mobile home near Northwest.
Yep. That was my second listing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was my uncle's house. It was fun.
That's the first time I talked to you.
We should have got it under contract, man.
Julian, how'd you get into it?
I started in 2009 being an investor in real estate. So that's how I got started.
Flips?
Yes. Well, I flipped and held. I was actually living in it, and then I got my second one real quick after I just learned the process. Liked it then. I was creating a business and investing in real estate, which I hadn't put any words to it, but now we're here. Now we're doing commercial buildings and residential.
So you invested way before actually getting licensed.
Yeah. I'm more of an entrepreneur mindset and education wise, so that's natural for me.
I got you. But the licensing, that was maybe a few years ago?
That was what, 2020? Pre-COVID?
Okay.
Or COVID time?
Yeah. Awesome. And you went straight into Selling North Georgia, or were you by yourself?
No, I came straight to, I met Michael through one of my buddies at the bank. They happen to be somehow related, and I had met
Of course, it's at the bank.
Yeah. And so we actually went to go see a property that I was trying to invest in. I think Michael was trying to invest in those properties. We both got there and we're like, nope, this is not a deal. And then I just kind of met him through there, and now I'm on the team.
I got you. Boomer, you were solo, weren't you?
Yeah, I was solo until March of this year, and it's a tough sled to pull, being a solo agent and new and not having much real estate knowledge. And since I've joined the team, it's been awesome.
Yeah, I started on a different team briefly, and it was not that great. But I think the solo era for me prior to Selling North Georgia, which was about a year and a half, I think that was the bulk of my learning experience. Like when you got to run the whole show like that.
Oh, yes.
When you got to do everything.
Totally different.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of times where I would call Michael and I wasn't even on the team, and he'd have to help me out.
I would do the same stuff. That's funny.
Cool.
But anyway, so that's how you guys got into it, got on the team and everything. Yep. We were just talking before we got the camera rolling about we work with a lot of buyers, and it's the buying process very lengthy, and when people are getting into it, they don't know what to expect. So.
Yeah, and there's a lot of confusion that goes into it. They're like, what do all these terms mean and everything else? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's for our listeners, let's kind of just start it at the beginning and go through what they can expect if somebody decides they want to make an offer on something.
I would probably tell the audience, like, hey, identify what you're trying to buy and give the realtor an address to go buy with. If it's not the actual address of that property, at least an address next door so we can find it. Once we can find it, we can, vet it for you, go through the details.
You don't know where every sign that's advertising for real estate is?
Most people don't even know if they just call me and say, oh, it's red and white or it's blue and white. And I'm like,
it's the red house for sale. It's the one for sale.
It's the one by the church, and that's all we have to go by. So if we can get a little bit more details and we can find the actual property, there's no reason why we can't get all the information to them and get it to them quickly so we can do an offer.
So your advice to them would be if there's no house number on a mailbox or something, at least maybe get the neighbor's
address, the road, with a number or a street name, we can probably get it.
So whenever you guys are actually getting out there though, like the buyer has identified the properties that they want to see, and you show them 5 houses, whatever, they decide, okay, this is the one I want to buy.
Well, before we've showed them any houses, You've got to get pre-approved.
That's right.
That's right.
You've got to get pre-approved. I'm not showing you. I don't know if you can buy a stick of gum. I want to make sure you can buy something.
You don't go buy the first one's free?
No. Well, depends. You know, I might vet them on Facebook or something. But no, for real, you've got to be pre-approved because you're just wasting your time, our time, the listing agent's time, the people whose house that we're going to invade's time. You've got to talk to a lender. If you don't know one, we've got several. But that's the first thing. But yeah, after you get pre-approved, we show you, several houses, and then we're ready to make an offer on one. Then that's where the real fun begins, is we decide what it's worth. If they got it priced appropriately, is it priced too high, or is it priced too low? I mean, if it's priced.
One thing I do want to say, Boomer, about the pre-approval process. A lot of people think it costs them money.
Oh yeah. No.
It's very, very easy. It doesn't cost you, and you can shop it around. I mean, just because you go with one bank doesn't mean you can't go with another bank.
You can get a better rate. Around 30 days.
And a lot of people think they're going to be locked down to something, and they don't know what they're getting locked down into. I tell them, look, don't be scared. Just go out there, get the best loan for you, and figure it out that way.
Yeah, a lot of people too are afraid of the credit hits.
Yeah.
But if you do it all in a short frame, and maybe
Yep.
you guys know the time frame, but like if you have, if you're shopping lenders and you have your credit pulled 5 times for the same reason in a week or whatever, it's one hit.
Yeah, it's just a soft inquiry. It's
And
not
most
gonna be
people,
bad.
and what I tell people is to start at the bank that they bank with first, because they already know who they are. They already have their IDs. They already have like a lot of their income, their statements, and all that stuff. So they could pull that out. Whether that way they don't have to print it out or download it into a PDF and then send it to 2 other banks. So, like I know whenever I'm buying something, yes, I use a preferred lender and they have all that, but I also still shop around because I don't know if a quarter of a point is worth it for me.
Yeah.
20 years, 25, 30 years.
So what about this? Let's say you're working with someone and they're qualified at 200 and they say, hey, can I see this one house that's 225? What do you say to that?
It depends on how long it's been on the market. If it's a brand new listing and they're only approved for 200 and they're asking 225, if I don't have anything to do that day, we may go look at it. But because you're not going to, in today's market, you're not going to buy a house for $25,000 less in the first 45 days. If it's been on the market 45 days, then it's well overpriced. But unless it's just something I want to go see.
Yeah, one thing I do want to add, I grew up in the era where like I would go buy something with my dad, and my dad would never pay full price for it. It always had to be a little
paying sticker.
Yeah, if you buy a car, you don't pay full price. You're gonna buy it, below price. Now, even if you do cash and full price, it doesn't matter. You may not get it. So, one thing I would want to emphasize is to really listen to your realtor when they're telling you, hey, your offer is not very strong. We need to make your offer a little stronger, whether it be closer to purchasing full price or over the full price. Just listen to your realtor because they know what's going on in the market.
Yeah, and I mean, our goal at Selling North Georgia is to be the most trusted name in real estate. We're not an extra $25,000 on an offer doesn't make us any more money. Yeah. I mean, we make a little bit more money. We're not trying to get people to spend it. It's, if you want the house, we're trying to help you get the house. So, I think I've had some pushback on some folks, and I just guess I hadn't earned their trust. They're like, "Yeah, this guy's just trying to make more money." I mean, it's really not about the money. It's trying to get people in their house that suits them, and if they're overpaying for it, then they're going to be mad at us in 2 or 3 years whenever they're trying to sell it.
So kind of back to the buying process in general, showing the houses, you find the one, you make the offer, you lock it, you figure out what price you want to offer. Yep. What is that next step?
We're in the due diligence period, so we need to order our inspection. The due diligence period is something that confuses a lot of my buyers. It's a time frame that is agreed upon in your offer.
And we pick how long it is.
Yeah, we usually run about 10 days. If it's commercial property, Yulian,
well, it varies a lot. It depends on what the commercial property is going to be used for. I mean, if it's chemical, if it needs a phase 1, phase 2, whatever. A restaurant's going to need a lot of due diligence. If we're going to be building, it's going to need a lot of due diligence. We did a deal that took 9 months because, we were kept on finding things during the due diligence period and extending the period. I mean, really comes down to what you agree with the other agent.
But if we're just buying a house,
You're buying a house right now, to be competitive, I would say 10 days would be a norm.
Max.
Yeah. And probably in those 10 days, you probably want to get your inspector and ask for a letter of termites is what I would recommend.
Yeah, for sure. The due diligence period is definitely when you do your inspections and you get your termite stuff done. And also, it's not a great time for sellers because in the state of Georgia, you can terminate the contract if you're the buyer during that time for any reason or no reason. You don't even have to give a reason. You just say, I don't want it. And you get your earnest money back. That's the other thing, earnest money. Some people are like, what is this? It is a check. It's like a engagement ring to show the sellers that you really want to buy it.
I've never heard that, but that makes sense.
Hey, if you go to a girl and say I want to get married and you don't bring a ring, she's gonna be like, get out of here, dude. So, but if you want to, you take them an earnest money check, and that goes towards your down payment, I guess is the best way to put it. It goes towards the purchase price, and if you are putting a down payment or
your closing costs,
costs,
whatever cash you need to bring to the
it's
table.
Not just money that goes away. So
one thing that I do want to say on that, I actually was listening to the Ignite thing that you caught me watching this morning. It's a way to make your offer separate from the others, especially in competitive markets like Chattanooga, where they're getting like 10, 15 offers. Someone puts earnest money of $1,000 and someone puts earnest money of $5,000. The guy that puts down $5,000 wants it more than the guy that won't puts down $1,000.
He's brought a bigger ring.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, whenever that earnest money is put down, and you say somebody puts down $5,000 earnest money, that means that after the inspection period, if they get cold feet or whatever,
it goes hard.
Then that $5,000 is going to the seller. So that
goes hard.
Just to kind of clear that up for anybody listening. That is why it is better to put more earnest money if you can, because that means the seller will be collecting more money if you decide for reasons outside of the contract that you want to terminate. Something else I think too is important to know about the due diligence period is using that as a negotiating strategy. Like you just mentioned, putting down more earnest money is a good negotiating tool or to stand out from other offers. But again, if you're a seller, you listed this house at $150,000. You get two offers that are exactly the same, except one is asking for a 10-day due diligence period, and the other one is asking for, say, 3. You're going to pick the 3 because the buyer only has 3 days to decide if they're in it or not.
If I was on the other side, I'd tell my buyer, look, you need to give enough time for the inspector to go out there and do the inspection, because the inspectors are out, a week, 2 weeks. And if you don't have that inspection, you don't know what you're buying.
Yeah, and that's the next step, is getting the inspection done. Those are pricey. They're $455 generally. Actually, I'm sorry, that's not right. They base them off the square footage. So the size, it's based on the size of the house.
$400 or $500
on average. On average, yeah.
But
good number.
That is money well spent, and you need to have those done. And I mean, unless you're just a handy guy that's been doing it yourself for 20 years, but then you're not watching this podcast.
So what about whenever due diligence period, inspector goes out there, he does his thing, the buyer gets the inspection report, and it's 70 pages long because they always are.
Oh gosh, yeah.
What does that usually look like? Like, does the buyer just have to like, okay, well, there are things wrong with the house, I can't buy it, or how do you address that?
That's what I ran into today, actually. The buyer was like, I can't afford to fix all of these problems that are wrong with this house. And I said, well, that's not where we're at. We go back to the seller and be like, we want all, X, Y, Z fixed before we're willing to buy the house, because we're still on that due diligence period. And if they say no, then we can say, okay, well, we don't have a deal anymore. And the buyer gets to retain their earnest money.
And also, I think that's a good point right there. At that point, if you're still under the due diligence period, it's a negotiation. At that point, you can go back to the seller and say, look, your house has 100 things that need to be repaired. It's going to cost $10,000. Do you want to split that cost with me? Or do you want lower your price? I don't know.
Basically, there's no one way to go.
There's not one way. That's where your negotiation, that's where your realtor comes in and says, look, the seller would be willing to do this, or I've done this in the past, or you find some common ground to move forward. But a lot of people get really, really scared on that inspection report because it's 70 pages and it looks at, there's a crack here, there's a dent here, and you're like, well, why are they putting it down? They're supposed to put it down. You paid for them to put it down. So I would advise people not to get scared just because it's 70 pages of something that's wrong.
We actually brought Tim from Precise in here, and we
Good
went
stuff.
heavy into all that stuff.
I love that guy. Yeah, he's good.
And they put a lot of good information in there and stuff that you need to pay attention to, but you also got to take into consideration everything that they point out. The house has been sitting there for 20 years and it's not burnt down yet because of that problem in the electrical box. So you gotta, it's a dance. It's a give a little, take a little.
I take it more as a discovery phase. As long as I know that it's there, and that's all I care about.
Yeah,
You know?
for sure.
Just knowing is key.
Right. So the inspection's done, the negotiations are had, whether we're asking the seller to fix something or whether we're asking for a price reduction, whatever. You get through that phase. What is the timeline looking like after that?
So usually if you're a FHA or a conventional buyer right now, we're trying to write contracts to close 30 days. So if you got 10 days of due diligence, generally I really, the lenders are trying to push to get the appraisals ordered because they're really behind right now, and they're wanting to order the appraisals before the due diligence is over. And I'm like, no, because once they order that, then that's another $400 or $500 that they've got that your buyer has to pay. And if you go ahead and pay for that appraisal and then you don't even get through the due diligence, now you've wasted $1,000.
Right.
So, but the appraisal is the next step, and that's $400 or $500. And they're trying to get those back in 2 weeks. So you got 10 days for due diligence, 2 weeks for appraisal. You're 24. You only got 7 days left
To actually close.
And that's
Run
if the
title.
appraisal,
Run
it's
title.
got to run title, go through underwriting. The bank's got to make sure all their stuff lines up, and they want to loan you the money still because they can. And there's a financing contingency and other things to protect you on your earnest money too. But generally, we try not to have those.
What you mean by that is if the loan doesn't go through, if we ask for 30 days on the contingency, the loan contingency, and day 29 the bank says no, we can't give you this money. That means you get to keep the earnest money, right?
That's right. As long as the bank has to say we're not loaning you that money.
Yeah,
The buyer at that point, the buyer still doesn't, or is out of their ability to say they're not buying. But if the bank says, hey, we're not loaning you, then you can get your earnest money back.
You guys get a lot of people who are confused about the difference between the home inspection and the appraisal.
Yes, often.
I could see how they get it confused, but it's pretty simple.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people I meet refer to them both as just the inspection. And the way I make that distinction is the home inspection is for you and you only. What did you say a minute ago? It's like a, what'd you call it, research?
Discovery phase.
Discovery phase. And the appraisal is for the bank.
Yeah.
Like to let them know that the money they're about to loan is going to be in a
You
safe
got to
place.
pay for it for the bank, even though they got all the money.
Yeah, the bank has to approve it. They're taking the risk, so they have to make sure that property is, the value is there, so they can take the risk. Yeah, they're not overpaying.
So when the appraisal's done, we were talking about before we filmed, or before we turned the cameras on, some of the difficulties we have with the appraisals coming in low. We talked about that on this podcast a few times. Any other issues you guys come up with besides that? They're kind of behind, like we said too.
Yeah, they're a little slow. That's aggravating whenever you're supposed to close on Tuesday and the appraisal's not due back in until Friday. The Friday before. It's like that's not much time to go over it, get it in front of all 13 people at the bank that need to see it and sign off on it, and still be able to close Tuesday. So, but that's part of the business in today's model.
And I think that's why a realtor comes in handy and not buying it through just, for sale by owner, because you probably have a due diligence period, and then you probably have an extension on that due diligence period because the inspector took too long to get out there. So then you have to get an extension, then you ask for another extension because the appraisal hasn't came in yet. And so if the seller is, getting angry, they're less willing to negotiate with you. So if the two realtors are communicating, there's good faith in there, and they're most likely going to work that out, versus you working with a for sale by owner that doesn't understand how the process goes, and he's just worried that he's not going to get his money, and he's frustrated, and he doesn't want to negotiate with you. That's key for us, helping our customers.
I don't know that I've ever seen a for sale by owner contract, buyer, seller, two people unrepresented, if that's even a word. Have you ever looked at one of the contract?
I've actually done one.
Okay, so there's just holes in them all over the place.
Yeah, lenders and underwriters love that.
Yeah, so it's like almost always going to hit the fan.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah.
And we've had we've had several listings this year come from people like that who try to do it solo, and then they get frustrated because things fall apart because either the contract was weak or in one person's favor and not the other, or buyer and seller working together, super emotional experience,
Very emotional.
and that kills deals all day long. So
before I became a realtor, I was buying deals. I was getting owner finance, and so the way I protected myself, because I was like, I'm sure I'm going to get beat here. I'm not a real estate attorney. I don't have that much experience. I mean, at that point, I was like 21, 22. Buying real estate was kind of scary, so I would just hire an attorney. I'd be like, look, this is what I want to buy, and he would protect me that way. But probably spent $2,000 or $3,000 more than I should, but that's the only way I knew how. But if you go through a real estate agent, that's your guy. You know, he's got your back. He's going to look after your best interests, so I would highly recommend that.
And if you're a buyer, it costs $0.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that we pass through. Most people don't understand how we get paid. And people think that just because they're going to talk to me and I'm going to show them a property, that they're all of a sudden they're going to be priced out of range, or that I'm going to charge them something. So that's one of the first things that I tell them. I'm like, look, you're not going to pay me, so don't worry about it.
How are we paid?
Well, I'm glad you asked. The other side of that knife is they don't realize that we don't get paid if they've looked at 50 houses with us over the past 6 months and then they decide, I'm not going to buy anymore. Or, I mean, that's fine if it's not a good time for you to buy, but some people don't realize that, hey, we don't get paid unless you buy a house. We're not on salary. There's no hourly something. You know, that's part of the risk of our job, and I'm not griping about it, but a lot of people don't even understand that.
Well, that's
if you see something, let me know. And it's like, well,
that's
okay.
also why, you know, I push a lot to get a BBA, buyer brokerage agreement, just because it tells them that, hey, I'm going to be on your side, and you lay out, you know, the stipulations, and they know what they're getting and that they're not paying. So that's me putting it on paper that they're not going to pay for my services.
You know, there's actually teams out there that charge their buyers.
I heard.
Yeah, there's one team that I know of semi-local that charges their buyers $600.
I was not aware of that.
To do that. It's a documentation fee.
We charge what?
$0. Cannot beat $0.
That's
Can't beat it with a stick.
Nope.
So we're
at the end. We've got our appraisal. Everything's working.
Well, we're not through the appraisal. The appraisal comes back.
Yeah.
And we have our fingers crossed that the appraiser thinks that the house is worth what you're trying to pay for it. But what if it's $10,000 lower than what you're trying to pay for it? What do we do?
Boomer, what do you think?
$10,000 is it depends on the price of the house.
Let's say it's $400,000. It came in at $390,000.
We should be able to come to some sort of agreement, because I work off of numbers and percentages, and I know not everybody thinks of things that way. Somebody's like, that's $10,000. No, it is $10,000, but the 10% or $10,000 is what 2%, the 2.5% of the price of the house. So that's a little bit of, you know, that's not too bad. We've seen them come in 25% low. Which is crazy, and that's unsurmountable. That's you can't get over that. You're gonna have to back up and punt or figure something else out.
So when it does come in low, though, let's use that.
Okay, so if it comes in lows, the seller has a decision to make. They have an expert telling them that their house is worth $390,000. If I've got the seller, hey man, if I can justify higher, I'm gonna do my best and work for them and just try to show them, yes, it's worth more. The appraiser didn't use XYZ comp, you know.
So you'll do your research and try to prove that.
Well, I've actually already showed them comps before we list the house. But if I've got the buyer's side, I'm like, yeah, that's a good deal for us because we're getting it cheaper. You know, you're getting a house $10,000 cheaper. Usually, you know, as long as you've got somebody reasonable on the other side, you can meet in the middle. And it just depends on the buyer too. If the buyer doesn't have any extra cash, because if it appraises at $390,000, that's all the bank's going to loan on is $390,000, or 96.5% if they're an FHA, or 80% if they're conventional. So the buyer would actually have to make up that in extra cash on top of their down payment and on top of their closing costs. So it's more of a dance.
I think the resolution to a short appraisal, you kind of touched on this, is the price point of the house. If you're working on someone buying a $400,000 house, they probably got some cash on hand. If you're working with a first-time buyer and their budget is $100,000, they very likely do not have the money to.
They're
make
probably young and haven't had time to save up that extra money that the $400,000 house buyer has. So, but yeah, it's another negotiation stage, and you've got a appraisal contingency in the contract and the financing contingency part of it too. If it doesn't appraise and you can't come to a resolution, the contract terminates, buyer gets their earnest money back, seller goes back on the market. But the seller's got to go back on the market knowing that it's worth $390.
So if I'm in the seller side and I'm advising my guy, from the get-go, we know that if we price it above or we price it just right or below price, we know that part. So then my point is going to be like, how low did it come in? And at that point, I would advise them, look, take the money, run, negotiate would be number 2. And then number 3 would be, look, we can not negotiate, put it back on the market, wait another month, 2 months for it to sell, to go through this whole process again. Which one is it that you want to do? It really just becomes a decision for the seller to do. What I try to push is the quicker I get my sell done, my seller gets the money, then they can either go buy another house or they can reinvest that money. So those are the things that I look at and the things that I advise.
I think too important to tell sellers about the appraisal portion of the process. If the appraisal is an FHA appraisal, that one in particular, and if one of you guys know specifically the answer to this, correct me. I think it's 6 months, or maybe it's 3 months, that value will be attached to that house. So if you go through the appraisal, it comes in $10,000 low on an FHA loan, and seller's like, nope, there's no way we can fix this. Let's go back to market. Your next FHA buyer is going to be stuck at that same value.
So you're still going to have the same problem, regardless them negotiating with that person or not.
I mean, you can argue with the appraiser and you can provide them with comps, but they tend to have a let's see, how do we want to put it?
Reservations from
I've made my decision and that's their decision, and usually it's final. So
right.
I've had heard of appraisers lowering the value even more. So be careful with that.
All right, so we go through the appraisal, do any negotiations necessary, and I mean, pretty much from there, what is it? You got a final walkthrough, right?
Yeah, we do a final walkthrough.
So if there were any repairs done in that due diligence period, make sure those are done. Smooth sailing from there, really.
Yeah. You get to the final walkthrough.
Well, one thing that we do need to address is between all that process, if you're working with an agent, the agent should be telling you not to go out and buy a new car, not to go out and buy furniture. Don't mess anything with your credit. Make sure you're making all your payments. Don't make large deposits or withdrawals from the bank.
That's right.
And also do a final walkthrough, which is very, very important, because maybe you've done some negotiations where the seller is going to make some repairs or et cetera, and maybe the seller didn't do the repairs, maybe they didn't do them to the standard that you would want. So at that point, you have to kind of pause and address that.
For sure.
So,
because people don't have bad intentions. Sometimes they just make mistakes. And prime example, we did a final walkthrough yesterday. We were supposed to close today, and we didn't close today because some of the stuff wasn't done. It's still moving forward, but we didn't get.
It wasn't done, or it wasn't done well.
It wasn't done at all. I take their word for it. There was a miscommunication. They'd hired somebody to do it, and that person didn't get done. And then last night at 9:00, I'm getting pictures of it being done. So, which is fine.
And I think that's one of the places where we as realtors come in handy, really handy, because we're the buffer between the message. We're basically the messenger, right? So we get the message hard from one side. We translate it into something softer and nicer to the other agent to get it done.
That's nice.
So that's kind of where you need someone.
That's the art.
That's the art. That's the art of real estate deals.
For sure. So smooth through the appraisal, do the final walkthrough, make sure the repairs are done, get to the closing table. Sign your name about 80 times?
If you're the buyer, minimum, I think.
Bring an ID.
I've heard.
Bring an ID.
Yes. Bring your ID. Get your wiring instructions. Your agent should tell you. you will get wiring instructions from the closing attorney, and make sure you call that closing attorney and verify with them the routing number. Because here's the thing, they've been hacking those emails, changing the routing number and sending it on, and you don't know that it's been hacked.
Somewhere in China, somewhere in Nigeria.
Some prince in Nigeria that's trying to give away all the money that he's stolen. But yeah, they'll change that routing number. It actually happened to a buddy of mine, but on a different situation. But and then you wire the money, and it goes away, and there is nothing anybody can do about it.
Yeah.
That's a bad time.
Yeah.
That's not the closing you want.
That's not the closing
you show up
closing.
closing.
We don't have those type of closings.
Well,
We don't do that.
that's
That's
why
never happened.
That's somewhere else.
No, it didn't happen with real estate, but you need to call that title company.
One thing that I like to do for the commercial guys, and I think it should also be done for residential, and we probably already do it, is, get the settlement statement before or the day of, early on. Go over it with your guy to let them know how much they're paying for closing, how much money they're getting at the end. Going through all that with the seller and buyer, I think is key, because you don't want to be sitting at the table and have some kind of dispute.
Yeah.
So if you can get that done and find the errors, or find the things that they maybe got charged twice, some, I don't know, title fees or whatever it is, you figure that out in the morning. That can easily be changed, but you have to run through it.
Yeah, the closing table is the last place that you want surprises.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
You don't want the attorney looking at the buyer and saying, "Hey, I need this is $6 short. I need the $6." And and the buyer has to get the cash out of his pocket. And what that did was made the lender say, "Why is this guy paying $6 cash?" And then we sat there for 2.5 hours waiting on them to decide that it was legit and for them to fund the loan.
Yeah.
That's real.
For sure.
That's hilarious.
Yes.
Well, awesome. I think that we have pretty well walked through the process.
Yeah.
Got to know you guys a little bit, how you started in real estate. So on that note, thank you guys for watching. And
Thank you.
We will see you next time. I'm Corey Shields.
I'm Boomer Bates.
Julian.
Take care.
See ya.